I'm Amy.
I'm Wendell.
And I'm Patrick.
And
this is
Yes,
But Why?
Podcast. Mike, I want to ask you a question about improv to get us started. Tell me what it is about improv that keeps you going back. Like, what is it sort of like, not just theatrically, but like, what about it fills your soul up?
Wow, that's a deep question. I think it kind of comes. I think it kind of comes in two parts for me. I think earlier in my career, it was the energy of creating new scenes and new characters and the freedom and flexibility. And now that I've been in Japan for so long, I've kind of re-energized myself with educating, hopefully, the regular person about what improv is. I think by the time I left the States, people started to learn a lot about improv, and the general person kind of knew or had heard of improv. But here in Japan, it's still like this thing that we're educating people about. And so I find that re-energizing for myself, and I think that's kept me going.
Oh yeah, so you like that. So you're into the idea that each person you have to re-explain what it is.
But yeah, I find that, I mean, I hope that the product that we put on stage is quite good, so that kind of helps give credence to the education of what we're doing. So I don't feel like I'm redundant or kind of dumbing it down for them to kind of repeat it, so it doesn't feel repetitive to me. It feels I'm tapping into their energy of discovery for the first time.
Nice. When was the first time you taught improv?
Yeah, I think outside of teaching it internally within the groups that I've been in, whether it was in college or abroad, the first time I actually put myself out there, had paid classes, had levels and stuff like that, was in Osaka, Japan, about 11 years ago.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on. Did you create the program on your own, or did you, was it within the construct of another school and you got hired on as a teacher?
Created the school, created the program, created the curriculum, went out and found the students. So I kind of just took little learnings from all the different groups I had been in, and kind of made a formula on what I wanted to teach. My initial idea, actually, I didn't think I would be in Japan this long. So I kind of wanted to teach to keep my own skills fresh for my, grand return back to the States. And so that was kind of the main thing, just to kind of keep myself going. But as I got more students, I thought, wow, this is working, and we can actually put a product on stage. And so it kind of snowballed into the groups that I have now in Japan, when initially I kind of just wanted to have students kind of help me keep my skills fresh.
It's pretty wild that you're like, you just go there and you create this whole curriculum and you make it all on your own. Like, a lot of people are looking to join somebody else's thing. You're like, I'm going to do it all on my own. I figured it out. That's a very brave thing to do. Where did you get the skills and the confidence to just go to another country and create this whole improv thing?
Just for the record, I don't think I figured it all out. So that, I hope that's not like in the schools or the classes that I give. I hope that's not the vibe that I'm like, I figured this out. Here's how we're doing it. I really think, I have the confidence, but I think I've been in enough groups to kind of learn what works, what doesn't work. I had a weird part-time job isn't the correct thing, but I was a writer for a website based in New York, pre social media age. It was called the improvReview.com. And so I was their Midwest critic. I'm doing air quotes as I say that. And that gave me access to go to see all kinds of different improv groups, write up a review for this website. And I got to also observe a lot of different styles. So just taking all these different learnings, I was able to kind of mash it all up into something that I felt I could teach for what I wanted to do. And I guess if students signed up and joined, then I felt that they bought into it. And if no one joined, then I would probably have to reevaluate my situation. So it was kind of like, this is what I'm doing. If people are on board with it, let's do it.
Have you always been a self-starter that way, like creating your own projects?
Yeah. I find myself very entrepreneurial. I think, I hope it isn't that I think I can do it better. It's more of I find things that aren't available in my immediate vicinity, and then I'm just like, okay, I'll do it then.
I don't think people who think that they're better than other people teach. Like I don't
Okay.
I feel like the impetus to share with other people is a different personality trait than the people who are like, "Did you know how great I am at stuff?"
True.
It's just a different
True.
kind of vibe.
Cool. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
I've certainly known improv teachers of both ilk, and I'm going to say
Right.
that the better ones are the ones that are fascinated with the ideas and, just sort of like have this, burning fire within them to spread the word of it, as opposed to like, hey, you know what? I'm great at this. Let me teach you how to do what I do, which is great.
Yeah, I think I'm quite competitive with myself. And so if I'm no longer doing sports, then I like the challenge of kind of not seeing what I can get away with sounds incorrect. That's not the correct impression I'm trying to give. But in my college group, I reached out to places in Chicago to guest perform at their companies just to see if anyone would answer. And here in Japan, I reach out to government agencies or I reach out to Google and different companies to see if I can lock them in and get that response. And so I think the initial challenge of, I wonder if I can create this group in this foreign country in a language that I don't speak. I like that challenge. So I'm quite competitive with myself to see how far I can push things on the back of a good product.
So how did you end up in Japan?
Yeah. Life, I guess, kind of brought me to Japan. I had traveled a lot as a kid. My parents got me really into traveling and seeing the world. And I used that to also travel to Australia, and I performed in Australia for just under a year. I had seen improv all across America. I really wanted to kind of expand my horizons and look at non-English countries, non-English based countries, and how they approach improv. Performing in Australia, it's the same language, but it's actually not. There's different terms, there's different nuances and stuff like that. So I figured going to Asia is a bigger jump, more of a challenge. So I initially thought of China and going to China first, but investigating China and learning about China, that's really China. So I kind of backstepped a bit and looked at Japan, because I felt there was enough Westernness, baseball, different kinds of food, Western foods are available. So if I got overwhelmed by being in Japan, I could still kind of fall back into these kind of familiar things of Western culture. And so that's what kind of set my targets on Japan.
So you started in Osaka. Why did you start in Osaka?
Yeah. For those who don't know, Osaka is the comedy capital of Japan. There's two giant schools based in Osaka, I think on par with on par with Second City and UCB, these kind of giant schools in the States. We have equivalent schools teaching comedy here in Japan, and they're headquartered in Osaka. And most of the comedians have the dialect from Osaka. It's a very distinct dialect. So my target was I need to be in Osaka to be in this ecosystem, as opposed to Tokyo being the big city.
Wow. So how was it what's the scene there? Is there a lot of comedy? Is it like schools that are churning out students, or is it like a bunch of troupes and performers competing for stage time? What's the thing? You say that comedians have the accent of Osaka, so clearly you have to go through there to earn your stripes in Japan. So what does that make the scene feel like?
The scene is very business. They're churning out students left and right. If you go past their headquarters, you see students practicing the routine outside prior to going into the school. Like it's almost a factory or a conveyor belt, sometimes in a positive aspect, sometimes in a very negative aspect of just churning out these students, kind of seeing what students stick in terms of popularity. And then I have kind of a more negative view of it, but they're kind of ground down. They're kind of in this mega corporation comedy school. But it's a massive scene. They quickly get on TV. They have a marketing budget. They have, keychains with their likeness on it. They have all this kind of branding for them. So it's a little bit different than like an exploratory scene or lots of different groups competing for stage time. It's very much they get into this machine and then the marketing and the business takes over in Osaka.
Huh. So like the schools, do they do like auditions for performers and then they like groom the performers until they're ready to be put out for public consumption?
Yeah, there are auditions for these groups. And just so we're clear, it's a different style of comedy. It's not like these comedy schools aren't really teaching improv. They aren't really teaching stand-up as we know it.
Right.
But it's Japanese style of comedy. So they kind of go in with their routine as their audition, and then the business will take over and kind of tailor their outward appearance, I guess. You see a lot of the students that come out and they have either like a weird haircut or like a weird bow tie, or like they give them some visual branding that kind of helps out on posters or on marketing, much more than in my experience in the States, where it's kind of like the content, if it's stand-up or it's, the skill for improv. Here it's very branding facing.
So like the people already have some skill and they're doing their act, and then the school just helps them hone it? Do they like fix them up? Is it like a makeover show? Like they fix them up and then send them back out in the world? Or do they like give them gigs and like put them on their television channel and like,
Yep. Yeah. It's not a makeover show, but they definitely give them the gigs. They lock them into different theaters. There's different TV shows they lock them into. So once they sign on, I kind of think of it as like joining a sports team. Like they sign this contract and then now you have to wear Nike and you love popsicles and like you have this brand, basically. This is what you need to do and you show up at this time. We lucked into this experience where we had two up and comers, and now they're very famous comedians in Osaka. They came to our improv studio and did a practice with us just to kind of see what it was like. And it was a videotaped episode for their show. It wasn't live, and that's important to this story. So they came, they started to do some improv. They're not improv trained, so that's why they came to us to see how these stand-up guys could do with improv. We did a great couple scenes. It was kind of fun. We had a break, and one of these kind of semi-famous comedians asked the producer, can he go to the bathroom? Again, it's not live TV. And the producer said, no, hold it. And then someone from my group, I think just trying to push the boundaries, asked me like, hey, Mike, can I go to the bathroom? Knowing that he wasn't under contract for this mega corporation. And I was like, yeah, sure, fine, go to the bathroom. That's like a normal human thing. We're not live. Go ahead. So he went to the bathroom and I think just sat in the bathroom for like 20 seconds just to prove a point, and then came back in. And you could see these guys that are like kind of famous going like, wow, okay. I wonder if in like their brain, they were just like, wow, these guys can go to the bathroom anytime they want, even though these guys, we're not famous. We're not making the mega money, but it was a weird understanding of where things were, I think, at that moment during this break of, all right, famous guys, you guys just stay there. I think it was kind of eye-opening for us internally to kind of see how they're treated.
Yeah, I mean, I think about that all the time when, certainly with social media now and with, the way that people see certain celebrities and we're like, micro staring at the tiny details of people's lives and judging them based on it when they're famous. I think it's an interesting thing to acknowledge the difference between that kind of thing. Do you think though that those actors were like fully accepting of what was going on with them? Were they just like, yep, that's it? Because I mean, if that's how you get famous as a performer in Japan, I mean, there really isn't any other option. You don't know what somebody else's style is, you know what I mean? And or culture, because this is just yours. Do you think that they noticed that you sent the guy to the bathroom, to make a point, or was it just something that you guys sort of witnessed and were a part of?
Yeah, I don't think that they really locked into what was happening. I don't think they noticed that. I hope kind of like deep in their brain, maybe, something got lit, maybe it opened up a little bit, but I don't think they really clued in on it. But they know, joining these schools and joining these companies, they know what they're getting into. It's not a secret that you become part of this machine. So, it's kind of their choice.
It's like something I heard recently was that when you get on Saturday Night Live, they go through all of your social media and erase stuff that they don't jive with.
Right.
So they'll just erase tweets and Facebook posts if it's an inflammatory, even in the slightest. Like before you start your first day on stage, they've cleaned your social media so that it looks just that way. I wonder if it's similar in that way.
Yep, I can imagine it's very similar. I mean, to be honest, there's also a lot of collaboration between the U.S. and Japan recently. This Yoshimoto is this giant school here in Japan. They collaborated with Second City, and they've done a couple seasons or a couple summers of shows partnering with Second City to do some long form, some short form, and some stand-up. We've even had Saturday Night Live do a season in Tokyo. So it's live from Tokyo. It's Saturday Night Live using Japanese talent, doing Japanese shows, Japanese music, music guests, and everything like that. That lasted a year and then didn't really work. And then the Second City Yoshimoto collaboration, I think, has struggled a bit, in my opinion, as well. Mainly because they aren't taking improvisers. They're taking these guys that have a different understanding of comedy, this Monssai 2-person stand-up, and throwing them into a long-form thing. And so they're selling out tickets because these are famous comedians, but they're doing a form that they have no training and likely no will to do. They're just in that machine saying, here's what we're doing. The business of Second City has collaborated with the business of Yoshimoto. Go do this.
So we were talking about that earlier. Tell me about the styles of Japanese comedy, the Monssai that you were talking about. Tell me again what is that style? And then what are the other styles that in these big comedy schools they're teaching? Right.
The biggest style, or the current style right now is Monssai. This is, if you can imagine two people, a 2-person stand-up routine, delivering lines and developing a story together. It's a scripted story that they've honed. What's unique about Monssai, I kind of think of it as Abbott and Costello, I guess. So from our perspective, maybe a little old school, but there's basically 2 roles. Every Monssai group has the same 2 roles. One person is like the village idiot, and then one person is like the clever, smart person. And so the village idiot basically says things that the audience or society is thinking, but because of Japanese rigid society, they actually don't say anything. So this village idiot will say things, for example, like the taxes are too high, or, why do we have to do that? Or why does the prime minister do this? And he'll deliver it in a funny way, kind of a cutting quip. And then the other role, the smart person, will usually, in a very slapstick way, slap him over the head or kind of hit him on the shoulder, call him an idiot, and reprimand him and bring him back down to earth, and kind of explain why, taxes are for the roads. Everyone knows that, dummy, or something much better than that. So what's interesting is everyone knows that these 2 roles exist. So you go to a Monssai show, someone's the dumb one and the funny one, and someone's the smart one and the clever one. So the audience knows what they're getting into. It's just how each group, what they take on, what issues they address, basically. And because that person, the village idiot, gets brought back down to earth, there's a Japanese idiom that basically says the nail that sticks up gets hammered back down. So if you have that idea of, everyone on the train is in suits, and, there's this uniformity image with Japan, I think, that we as Westerners have an understanding. And so by this village idiot saying something that everyone is thinking, and then he gets hammered back down to be equivalent to all the other nails, basically. Everyone kind of leaves the show feeling it wasn't risque, it wasn't off-putting, it fit into the cultural rules, basically. So that's Monssai, two-person stand-up, kind of Abbott and Costello.
It sounds kind of like straight absurd.
Yeah.
Similar, I mean, with the political overtones, which I'm digging on as you're describing them for sure. But yeah, the first thing I thought of when you said the two people and that like one of them is the idiot and the other person reacts to that, I was like, oh yeah, straight and absurd. But it doesn't exactly fit, but I really like the sort of satirical nature of it. Yep. And I like the way you've, like the idea that it would be risque if the one person just said it, but because they have the follow-up person say, you shouldn't say that, it's okay. Man.
Yeah.
I wonder if some of the people in the U.S. that have recently gotten in trouble for saying crazy things, if they had like a co-host who was all like, oh man, what are you talking about? Maybe that would have helped.
Yeah, right? Yeah, that's true. That's true. So Monssai is kind of like the current thing, and I think, in my opinion, maybe the last 20, 25 years, it's been the form here in Japan. There's some like culturally more significant forms of comedy called Rakugo, for example, and that's where these are very traditional stories. They're not, in my understanding of Rakugo, I could be proven wrong, but in my understanding, they're not necessarily new stories. It's not new material. It's very traditional stories. Maybe imagine like an old comedian sitting down and telling you about like Hansel and Gretel or some kind of story that we all know. We've all heard before, but the skill comes in the delivery of how it's given. The intonation, the passion, the energy, the pauses. And so this Rakugo is kind of retelling of famous stories to an audience by a really good orator, basically.
So that's a solo situation.
Yeah. Yep. And it's very structured. They wear kimono, they sit down, they have two props, basically. And it's always the same two props. It's a fan, if you think of like the stereotypical Japanese fan, and then kind of a towel, or like a tissue, or like a scarf, a handkerchief. These two props kind of substitute for everything else. If there's a knock on the door, they'll use the fan and like hit the ground a couple times to symbolize that. Or, they use these props to their advantage. So it's the skill, it's the oratory skill of the performer, and also like the propsmanship of ad-libbing using these two standard props, because there's rules in Japan society, right? So how they use these to kind of symbolize other things as necessary in the story separates the good Rakugo performers from the bad Rakugo performers.
So these two are the two main styles of comedy, or the two only styles of comedy?
I would say the two main, because I'm just afraid someone with a better understanding of Japan would be listening and be like, Mike, you clearly missed this style. And I would be like, oh, you're right. So
right on. It's a large place. You never know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, right on. Well, it seems interesting that there's like solo stuff and then there's two-person stuff, but there's not a lot of other things. So when you got there and you were working in Osaka, clearly your creation of the improv was like group working. It sounds wild compared to what they're doing. What was the reaction of people when they came in to take your classes? Like, why am I in a group with 7 people? Or how was it received when you first presented it?
Yeah, there's kind of 2 layers to it. How was it received by the people who joined or auditioned? And then how was it received by the audience as well? The first batch of people who joined were mostly Westerners. I think we had 1 or 2 Japanese that joined the first year, like 12 years ago. And I think they all had an understanding. They had heard of improv, whether Japanese people traveled abroad and had seen it. So I lucked out that I found some early members that wanted to join or at least try improv. And then in terms of the audience, that's more of the uphill battle, I think. When you say it's wild, it is very different for the Japanese audience to kind of see us go on stage as a group like this and make up things. The good side of it is Osaka is a comedy city. So as soon as we just say it's a comedy show, they're like, okay, I like comedy. It's once we get them in the door and sit down and then say, give us a suggestion or, give us a relationship or something. And they're like, oh, we need to participate in this. Oh, this is different. So that's always been an uphill battle, I think, with the audience kind of coaxing out suggestions as opposed to like in the States or in Australia. It's almost like telling people to stop yelling suggestion because we got one,
Yeah.
I've seen there are some all Japanese groups now here in Tokyo that are doing improv, and they have a very unique way of getting suggestions from their audience. And it kind of comes back down to Japanese culture, in my opinion. They hand out a survey before the show, a piece of paper, and it's like, give us a verb, a noun, a location, a relationship, a place you want to go on vacation, like the standard 10 ask fors. And they hand it all out with pencils to everyone in the audience. And then they collect these sheets before the show starts. And then they pull out the sheets and use those suggestions, rather than go into the audience and saying, hey, you give me a suggestion. Because again, the nail that sticks out gets hammered back down. So there's kind of this fear in the audience that if they give a suggestion of, uncle and neighbor, whatever the suggestion is, and if it's a horrible scene, they internalize it as it's their fault. That suggestion led to a bad performance. And so by these groups giving this kind of survey, it separates if the scene doesn't work from the person in the audience who said it. So it's
Since
kind of
you
fun.
don't do the surveys, you speak to people in the audience, right? And you're in the shows in Osaka. Did you ever have anybody like walk out after a scene? Like, did you ever see somebody actually have an emotional reaction to a scene as if it was their fault?
Yeah, you definitely can see like a reduction in offers from the audience. You know what I mean? If that scene didn't go well, and then it's like, cool, let's jump into something else, and you can see like none of the Japanese people are going to say anything, and like the 10 foreigners will lean into them and be like, hey guys, help us out here. So the show is going well when the Japanese audience are fully engaged and continually giving suggestions, and we're kind of struggling if we kind of pivot and kind of look for the Westerners for a little bit of help in the audience.
Wow, that's what a visceral connection to the show going well or not. That sounds really super intense.
Like the Second City Yoshimoto collaborative show that they do with short form and long form recently in Japan. I brought all the members of my group to the show just to see how, quote unquote, the big boys do it. Like how do they produce the show? How do they run it? And I wanted everyone to enjoy it. I didn't really say any rules or anything within the group, but I really wanted to learn how they got suggestions, because we kind of knew that the audience could be rough because these are all Japanese people that have never really heard of improv. They're only going to see these Monssai guys, and now suddenly these Monssai guys are asking for suggestions. And so we're in the audience watching, and the audience was really rough, really hesitant to give suggestions. And from my perspective, unfortunately, everyone in my group kind of helped out and gave suggestions as the host started to struggle and look for help. Like he would, hey, give us a suggestion. And there was 2 seconds of silence. And then someone from my group would give a really supportive, really good, easy to work with suggestion. Nothing mean, nothing good luck with this suggestion, really a benign, good suggestion. But internally, I kind of wanted to tell everyone in my group, shut up. I really want to study how they get suggestions from a tough audience. Maybe I'll have to go back again by myself and just kind of see that, because when you bring 15 supportive members of my group and they go to support the show, they were really supportive as audience members because we've been on the receiving side of it. But from the business side of it, I really wanted to see how do they manage, how do they coax this out, what do they do? So the jury's still out on how they handle it as opposed to how we work it through it.
What's interesting, when I first learned improv, I actually learned it without a suggestion.
Nice.
Yeah, it was this wild hair idea that the guy who ran the theater that I learned at decided to do, and so now I can use suggestions because I understand how to use them and what they're for. But when I first started, I feel like I'm kind of glad that I did it that way, because I feel like I would have been thrown off. And also I would have dealt with stuff like that, where it's like, now I have to talk to the audience and like get them in, as opposed to starting just a montage show of randomly disconnected scenes and just letting it flow in an artistic manner. When you started, what was the style that you started with? Was it short form or long form?
Yeah, it started, I guess, both phases. Started initially in college with short form, because that was the cool, easy thing to do. When I came to Japan, it was almost a recycle of it, because we dabbled with long form. We do some long form here. We did Del Close Marathon in New York, so we kind of ramped up and went through long form here in Tokyo and in Osaka. But we found, because the audience is still so new to the idea of improv, like I kind of see the Japanese audience now as like America 20 years ago, maybe. Like no one knew what improv was, and then Who's Line and Comedy Sports and some of these bigger things started to kind of get it into a more general conversation. Here they don't. So when we do long form here, it's a struggle, because it's like, cool, we have this suggestion, and then sit back, buckle up, we'll be back in 40 minutes, like this Herald now. And, talking to the audience after the show, they're just like, I don't know why did we yell rabbit at the beginning? And then 40 minutes later, like, it's been harder to buy in, I think, in long form here in Japan. And so we opt for short form domestically in Japan, because we find it's easier to kind of pivot. If the scene isn't going well, we get another suggestion. It keeps the audience engaged with us. We also alternate languages. Our show is bilingual, so it's a 2-hour Japanese-English show. And so by doing that, by offering that, we find it's easier to do it in short form.
And this bilingual show you're talking about, this is your show in Tokyo, the Pirates of Tokyo Bay?
Yep, so we have Pirates of Tokyo Bay in Tokyo, and then we have Pirates of the Dotonbori in Osaka. Dotonbori is just like a giant river in the city. So there's two pirate groups in Osaka and Tokyo doing this style.
And you run both of those?
I founded both, and now I just run the Tokyo one, and I occasionally guest perform in the Osaka one.
Oh, so there's people that you taught running the Osaka location?
Yep.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, and then when we tour internationally, we kind of pick, it's not an all-star team, but we kind of pick from people from both cities, both pirate groups, and then create a team and travel.
Sure, I bet you traveling is expensive, and so only a few people can do it, for sure.
Yeah, it's more of like time, I think. So we have 30 people between the two cities, and it's more of like, cool, we need to go to Manila, who can go? We've, like, if I can brag for 1 second, and this is the only second, we've lucked into having sponsors and having like paid travel. So when we, most of the time when we travel, that's not the issue, because we lean into our Japanese-ness. So we'll hit up like the Japanese Embassy of Manila, and we're like, hey guys, you must be starving for native language content. We're in town, let's do this. And so we lean into our Japanese skill to kind of fund a lot of our travels.
Very nice. That's smart. Listen in, people.
Yeah, we don't want to step on the toes. We don't want to step in the toes of like English. So like when we go to Singapore, if we were to go to like an English play, like a theater department for the University of Singapore, and say like, hey, we're in town, pay us money, we'll teach you about improv, that could step on the toes of any local groups. And we know that there are local groups. So we're not there to kind of step on their toes. And so we'll lean into like the Japanese department of the University of Singapore, or the Japanese Society of Singapore, like a cultural exchange program. Yeah. And so that's kind of helped us navigate without stepping on anyone's toes.
Well, that's smart too, for you to acknowledge your niche, like to say, oh, this is one special thing that we've got going for us, and so we're going to focus on that. I mean, that's the key to marketing and and making sure that people always remember you, is to constantly focus on that one detail that makes you special and different than everybody else.
Yeah.
Was that something that you learned like earlier in your life as a marketing person, or is that something you learned in Osaka, or is that just something it never occurred to you to do?
No, I learned about it like the hard way, I guess. Life's hard.
Yeah.
When I moved from Osaka to Tokyo and started the wheels in motion of making the second group, I reached out to, there are much more bigger companies here in Tokyo in terms of corporate training or corporate gigs. So I thought Tokyo would be easy. I can make a bunch of money in Tokyo. So I reached out to some Japanese big companies. For example, I don't know if I should say the examples. Some big Japanese tech companies. So I reached out to them, and they were like, "Improv, I don't know what that is, and why are you called pirates? This is weird. Goodbye."
Sure.
And so I quickly was like, "Oh man, this isn't working." So I kind of pivoted and went to the American embassy and the American tech companies here in Tokyo, because I figured someone in HR has heard about this, or they have enough experiences. And so we quickly got hired by that angle. And so I kind of used that learning of like, okay, my uniqueness in the pitch in Tokyo, I needed to go through the Western route first, lock them in, get some results, and then I can go to the Japanese companies. So touring internationally, I just reversed it, and thought, okay, now I need to go to the Japanese angle. Not saying that we're pirates, like this weird name of a group, but like, we can give you Japanese content in the language that you're probably starving for. So yeah, I kind of just reversed the learning from trying to do it in Tokyo.
That's super great, though. What a smart move on your part to find a way to help fund it, and also to find a way to really find the audience that would appreciate you the most.
Yeah, I think, if people are listening and they're like, oh, wow, I can do that too. The biggest thing that I learned is it takes a lot of time. Like, we're talking at least 5 years before people really started to discuss with us about paying for us to travel internationally. Like, it's not a one and done pitch and you're in. And so that was another big learning that I had was, you need to play the long game, but it's worth it. Like, it can happen, and you just kind of need to grind through it. And, a lot of mini wins lead up to a big win. Our first tour was to Hong Kong, that we self-funded ourselves to go to Hong Kong. And then we self-funded to go to Beijing. But then the next time we talked to these other places, we conveniently didn't mention those were self-funded. We just said, hey, we've done these festivals, we've done these tours, we're experienced travelers, we can do this. And so it was a long game to get to kind of what we're lucky enough to have right now.
Yeah. Well, you worked hard. You put in the effort, and you're still putting in the effort. How did you decide to create a second location? Why did you leave Osaka, which is the center of Japanese comedy, to go to Tokyo?
Ooh, that's the question of the day.
Yeah?
Life, I guess, brought me. That's like the short answer. Say relationships change, life changes, and
Sure.
so there's kind of just a need to move on, and so I kind of went to Tokyo.
You're being so ginger about this.
I kind of went to Tokyo not with like my eyes set on the big city or like taking on the capital, or there are some improv groups here in Tokyo. I didn't come to the city to like fight with them or anything like that. It was just life threw me a curveball. And I decided to take a different path. And so I moved to Tokyo and continued with my passion and just made a second group, I guess. So I'm very much still connected with Osaka. I love Osaka. But I'm happy now that I've moved to Tokyo. Things have grown bigger. Like, the group here in Tokyo has grown faster and bigger from the learnings that I learned running the Osaka group and the connections that I made in the Osaka group.
And the Osaka group still exists, so like when you left, you had enough of a team that you could say, how to run this, keep it going, and I'm going to start a new location? Yeah, I had. We didn't. I think they would agree. I'm sure they're going to listen, but it wasn't like a clear succession of like, okay, Steve, you're in charge now. It was kind of like, wow, how do we do this without Mike? So they're going to do it by committee. Like,
one person's in charge of finances, person's in charge of this, and they kind of did it by committee. And then it's kind of panned out to someone being the leader as it is now. And so, yeah, I'm very happy with how it worked out. It wasn't any dramatic, like, I choose you and pass the baton and drama. It was like, all right, guys, let's just team together, have everyone's back, and figure it out as we go. And so, yep, they're still going. And then Tokyo is going very well, too.
So tell me how Tokyo got started. Do you guys have a space that is all your own? How do you organize it? Do you do auditions? Are there classes? Tell me.
Yep. So when I moved up to Tokyo, I brought up, like, just for the weekend, 2 members from the Osaka group to help me run auditions, because I was worried that I would do auditions by myself and not see the full picture of the audition batch, basically. So I needed some other eyes that knew what we're looking for to be pirates. So I brought up a couple of people. There was a huge audition. It's like 30 people that auditioned for the group that didn't actually exist. There was no pirates in Tokyo. So it was a fun jolt of energy that this many people wanted to audition. And we took a group from there. What I've heard is we're the only group in Tokyo that has open auditions. There are other groups that just have other ways of getting into that group. And so I think when I came into town, or the Pirates of Tokyo started, people were like, oh, I can just audition and just try to get in this group. That's great. And so we kind of lucked into that kind of access to a lot of people that were curious about us. And so we continue to have open auditions, and there are other groups that have different modes of joining their group, which is totally fine. But we like the freshness of just saying, if you think you got it, we'll listen and we'll watch and judge you, basically. Yeah.
Do you continuously have open auditions in both cities?
It's yes and no. It's not like every June we have auditions. It's not like a structured thing. It's more of as there's turnover or change, or people returning to their home country, or people moving on with their life. Like, as the group needs auditions, we will, or as the group needs members, we'll have auditions, basically. It just so happens that it's turned out to be about once a year we have auditions, but it's not a set in stone thing. We don't have to have auditions every year if we don't need it.
Moving on with their life, does that mean that a lot of the people that are in your troops are people who are in Japan for a short period of time, like short-term transplants, or is that mostly who you're hanging out with?
I would say it used to be, and I very quickly learned a tough lesson to bring it to like a somber moment, but like the massive earthquake and tsunami and nuclear disaster in northern Japan, basically that caused a lot of people to leave Japan. And I remember we had one practice, there was only 5 members at the time, and it was like the most surreal moment. It was a couple of days after the disaster, before we kind of grasped exactly how bad things were getting. One guy was like, hey, Mike, I'm sorry, but I'm going to be leaving Japan and going back to England. Sorry. And then like 2 seconds later, another person's like, oh, this is weird. I actually wanted to tell you the same thing. I'm leaving and I'm going home too. Bye. And then a third guy was like, oh, this is also uncomfortable. I'm also leaving the country. So it's me and another person left. And we're like, wow. So that kind of opened my eyes of like, if everyone just left the country or something happened, the group dissolves. And so we took that learning and we've kind of made the group bigger as like a buffer. We've also gone to more Japanese members because in theory they live here most of their life. And so that's really stabilized us. The learnings from that kind of traumatic practice has changed the Tokyo group to become bigger and more Japanese focused, which only makes sense because we can culturally connect with the audience better having more Japanese members, more fluent Japanese speakers, as opposed to us who are studying the language and might not be naturally fluent. And so it's made the product better. And we've really adjusted our style. You could almost trace it back to, had that not happened at that practice, we wouldn't have this niche to travel internationally with, to lean into that Japanese culture as well. So yeah, we're trying to find the silver lining, I guess. So right now the answer is no, it's not so many expats as it used to be.
What have you learned from the Japanese members of your team? Like, because from what we've discussed, it would seem that like Japanese comedy is very different from improv. So for the people who are Japanese born that are part of your team, how do they react to this style, and you know, what do they feel about it? Are they, clearly they're into it, but like, you know, do you have any experience of what they went through when they were adjusting to the style, or?
Yeah, I think they have helped us adjust our style, I think.
Great.
With the realization like, hey, we are in Japan. We are a bilingual group. This only makes sense. And so I think some of the earlier members in the group, you know, a decade ago, the Japanese members, looking back in it, they were probably like, this is too goofy or too like silly what we're doing. And I hope now that the current Japanese members, the people in Tokyo, are like, yeah, the product that we're doing now is much more respectful of the culture, I guess, or at least nuanced enough that we understand the culture as opposed to just the tourist approach of Japanese culture. You know, like this, you know, everything's chopsticks and, you know, whatever it is, like this very surface level opinion of the culture. And now I think they've helped us learn and kind of adjust to really know what's going on with the audience and the culture and the country that we live in. And so they've helped us adjust. There have been times at practice where we do stuff and they're like, Mike, that, you know, that probably wasn't the best idea. Let's not talk about the emperor, or let's do this and let's do that. And it's taken me a while and maybe longer than they would have liked, but I think I'm on board 100% now. I've just got it. Okay. Yes, we're in Japan. This needs to be different than, you know, what I did in college or what I did in Australia. We need to continue this path because that's the way that we're going to win in the market, I think. Yeah.
Have there been any, you know, lessons about improv that you've learned through the infusion of Japanese culture? Is there anything like, I don't know. I like to think of improv, you know, and yes-anding as a sort of lifestyle. And I wonder how that has been affected by your acceptance and adjustment to the Japanese culture.
Yeah. Oh man, geez. There's a lot of ways.
Questions.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to go with this. I think myself, I kind of now see myself, and I hope each member, you know, we have members from England, we have members from Canada, we have members from India, Japan, all over. We kind of become cultural ambassadors of where we're from. And so when I can nail something really nuanced about Japanese culture, like for New Year's in Japan is a huge thing. New Year's in Japan is equivalent to like a Christmas holiday or, you know, this kind of time in America. It's family time. There's very specific food that people eat for New Year's here in Japan. So when I can reference that and to a minute detail, I think the audience is like, okay, this kid gets Japan and kind of gets that respect. And so I've had that success on stage, and that's made me better as a person in society in Japan off stage. Like I need to learn more about the culture. I need to be better understanding because I can take that knowledge back on stage. And so hopefully I've been a better person off stage by trying to dig into the culture as much as possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. What a interesting way to learn a new culture too, to like go and do improv there and to really learn based on the reaction. Like what you're describing where you like take the audience's reaction and adjust the show to that. It sounds like a lot of stories I've heard with stand-ups. You know, they do the same set over and over, so they hear the way people react to it and then they adjust the jokes. But it seems similar in that you're coming from a specific mindset and you're trying to adjust to this other culture that you're living in so that you can be an entertainer and not a distraction or you know, something offensive.
Yeah, I mean, the long-term success, in my opinion, doesn't work if it's offensive or if it's just kind of this crazy foreigner on stage goofing around. We could probably get short-term success with that. But if I'm also going to live in this country and be a part of this society and try to build something that my name is associated with, it's only to everyone's benefit to fit in where you are, to understand where you're at, and give the audience something that they can relate to. Something that we're big within the Pirates is our suggestions or our scenes need to be rooted in Tokyo for the Tokyo group. So if it's a stadium, if that's the location, or if it's a restaurant, it has to be, for example, Tokyo Dome, because that's a stadium in Tokyo that everyone knows. So we try not to be as general. We try to be more specific to Tokyo because that's the only thing that we can relate to. Like I said, we have Canadian members, Indian members, Japanese members, American members, and then the audience is multicultural. There's people from all over the world in the audience. So I can't talk about things from Minnesota where I grew up because there's probably not another Minnesotan in the audience. And the person from England can't really talk about British things. So we have to remember, where are we right now? And right now we're in Tokyo. So let's lean into that knowledge as much as possible. And that's how we connect and win with the audience. So when we travel, we try to do the same thing. When we go to Manila, we all learn like 20 Tagalog words. We learn some high schools and some colleges and some businesses in Manila and use that to our advantage when we perform in that country. And we do this for each country.
So when you went to Del Close Marathon this summer, you just knew to make a lot of Trump jokes and you were good?
Well, actually, good news is we weren't in Del Close this year, so we didn't have to deal with any of that. It was a couple years. It was a couple years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to be like, so you're not doing any Trump jokes, and your British friends are not doing any Brexit jokes. They're probably better off.
Yeah, we came at just at a right time before all the current news is happening. Yeah, but we found that that's just a better way. We need to remember that everyone's international, at least where we're performing in this part of the world. When I was in Minnesota performing, everyone knew Perkins Restaurant. They knew all these different things because we weren't a very international group. It was just people from Minnesota performing and watching. I think I learned about this in the hard way. I got thrown in the deep end when I went to Australia because I performed in Western Australia, not in like the big cities on the East Coast in Sydney or Melbourne, but in Perth. And as soon as I open my mouth, everyone knows I'm not a local. I'm not from there. Yeah. And some of the suggestions were really heavy localized suggestions because they wanted to see how would I react. Like, they were kind of rough. I would ask for a suggestion of a location and they would say Bumsbury. Never heard of Bumsbury. Don't know where this is. Don't know what this is. So they would kind of make me a deer in headlights. Like, it was quite a rough couple months as I kind of struggled with, identifying or connecting with that audience, even though it's in English, it's in my native language. And I remember there was one kind of pivotal show for me where I actually had a travel book in my back pocket. Like, this is before smartphones and everything. So I had some like Lonely Planet in my back pocket, and they yelled out something that I identified as a very local term. And so I just paused the show and I was like, hang on. I went to the glossary, found the word, and then like I asked them for a couple seconds and I read a paragraph of like what this thing is. And I was like, cool. I now get what this is. And then we started the scene and everyone kind of laughed, like that I was putting this effort into, I identified that it was a word that I didn't know. After that, I had studied so much. I got myself in with the community as much as I could that I kind of became like a fan favorite where people were like, okay, they would test me. I would have a response to it and I would be able to build on it in a good way. And I think I took that knowledge from that stress in Australia and that success in Australia and tried to do that now in Japan.
I like the idea that in Australia they were like, we beat him down and he figured it out. We like this kid. It's very very like gang, very like mob mentality. Like this like, we'll beat him up and if he sticks around, we like this kid.
Yeah, and this was the audience. This wasn't even like the fellow performers. Like, they were kind of like, oh man, good luck with this kid. They were the best. And I only look back at Australia as like the best moments, the best time ever. That's why I think of it as my formative years. But it really was like getting thrown in the deep end, figure it out. And I was like, wow, this is a whole another language. And now, it was a great time. And I think it's led to the success here in Japan.
So what would baby Minnesota Mike say if you told him that you were going to be running an improv theater in Tokyo? Can you believe this is your life?
Yeah, I think, I guess study Japanese more would probably be
That's your advice to yourself?
The faster I could pick up the language, the better, I think. And then beyond that, it would just be don't hold back. Just jump in. Maybe the life lesson from the Australia jumping in the deep end, I needed to have done that earlier in my life, I think. Don't go for easy, go for hard, and then build on that.
Yeah.
I think I ramped up. I think I took too slow in a lot of things.
Too slow, says the guy who's running his own theater in a foreign country. I think you're all right. I think you live a pretty wild life, mister.
But it's been over like a decade, I think. So, I mean, it's been a slow, the graph would be very, a slow build.
That's okay. That's probably best. Man, so right now, what's the project that you're working on? What's the thing? Or if it's not a show, but maybe it's like a detail that you've been focusing on, what's the thing that you've been thinking about now, like right now in your performing? You perform, how regularly do you perform?
Publicly, we have 1 or 2 shows a month. And then privately, we do like corporate shows or parties or corporate training, maybe twice a month, I think.
All right, so like 4 shows a month. So like every month, what's the thing? What's the thing right now? Because you know how like, you've been doing improv for a long time. Some days you're like super focusing on building characters. Sometimes you're like, oh man, I need to add more detail. What's your thing that you've been thinking about lately?
Yeah, I think there's kind of 2 answers I'll give you. One is for the group itself, and then one is kind of just for me selfishly. For the group, we're integrating technology as much as possible for a variety of reasons. So we have an iPhone and Android app that the audience uses during the show. So they're engaged during the show. That's kind of to separate the culture, like to allow them to not have to cheer or be pressured to do things with us. They can just put their head down, interact with the app, and be engaged that way. We have some other technology things that we use. We have this like device that if you like us on Facebook, the number flaps and changes in the theater, basically. So as more people like us, it flaps more. Like if you think of those old airport display things, like the flight schedules, we have one of these devices for all of our social media. So it's like a physical thing that changes as the audience interacts with us. So we're trying to find ways to digitize and use technology as much as possible. And we have a couple ideas on next steps for the group. So just kind of keeping us fresh, keeping us with the times, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've never heard of any theater doing something like that. That's really awesome.
Yeah. So we try to, stay ahead of the curve or just kind of keep ourselves with the times. It kind of keeps the audience excited. For me, myself, I'm trying to think about, I guess, residual income kind of as I build the brand in these 2 schools or, these 2 groups. And, let's say if life brought me somewhere else, like how can I establish this as a product that kind of continues in what I built it as? So keep the quality high and then kind of also help me in my life as well, even if I'm not there, if that kind of selfishly makes sense.
Like business-wise?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Right on. Yeah, you're so business-minded. Like, it's really great, all this stuff that we've been talking about. It's like all the marketing things and the way that you've had to adjust the way you perform based on the culture that you're in and the openness you have to that. It's really fascinating. You're clearly the right person to be there.
Well, thanks. I think a lot of it is just trying and then monitoring what works. I track a lot of data. We have all the numbers basically to see what's working and what's not working. And so I'm able to kind of talk about the successes. And there have also been, obviously a lot of failures too. So it's that long game of kind of continually jumping in the deep end and trying different things to see if it works.
Yeah, jump right in that deep end.
Yeah.
Good. We're right at the end here. Do you have any final advice that you'd have for people who are possibly thinking of either trying improv or moving internationally to do theater?
Yeah, I think people have probably heard this before, but as long as it's your passion, do it. Because I've asked my wife, I've spent a lot of late nights, just doing website stuff for the Pirates and different things. Like, I spend a lot of time on this, but I do it because it's my passion, and like, I love this to death. And so I think if someone has that passion, go for it. And if they don't have that passion, find a way that they can connect it to their real life. I think, like, if it's not exactly clear-cut passion, then they need to find a way to create connections to their real life. So we have a guy who is an accountant during his day job, so he's in charge of the finances. We have someone who does SEO for a major tech company, so they help with SEO for the website. So we're giving them like resume building skills. We're allowing them to try ideas and fail with this group, the Pirates of Tokyo Bay, and then they can put that on their resume or kind of take those learnings in a less pressured way than if it was their full-time job at a tech company and they've spent a bunch of money and failed at it. They can take the learnings from failing with us and apply that to the real world. So there's kind of 2 points. Either it's your passion, go for it. If it's not, if you just kind of like it, then find ways to connect it to whatever your passion is. And that will keep you interested.
Yeah. I like that. And what an awesome improv school to help people actually build up their resume. Like, in a legit way. That's so awesome.
No, I really think if you were to talk to other members, and, people have gotten jobs based on referencing things, I think, within our group. Hey, here's the P&L sheet that I built for this Pirates group, and here are the last 4 years of expenses. This is, whatever. And they can show that to people in interviews, or they can talk about the marketing tactics that they've done with, digital media and kind of the learnings that they've had in a very minimal stressful situation doing it for us, basically. And from the group's perspective, if someone's trying something, it's better than not trying something. If someone's trying a digital ad or someone's trying to do accounting, it's better than not trying to do it. It helps the group, even if it's not ideal and perfect.
I think that's a good life lesson in general. It's always good to try.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for talking to me tonight and sharing such wonderful stories and elucidating so much about the Japanese comedy scene for me. I really appreciate that. It's been really wonderful. I hope everything with your group in Tokyo goes well, and I hope you continue to have a wonderful time in Japan.
Thank you, Amy. And if you're ever here, obviously, if you're ever in Japan, look us up and let me know. And keep up the great work with the podcast. I think it's great that you're giving people access to other approaches and other ideas. I think this is a really cool podcast. I love the name. I think when I first heard about it, I just thought it was a very clever name. So I appreciate your time as well.
Cool. My co-host, who couldn't be with us, he likes to say that the but whys are when we make you pull details out of your story. You're like, oh, I see that you did that, but why did you do that? And so he'll always go, but why? I'm like, oh God, nice. You and your dad jokes.
I love it. It's been great to kind of talk about this. I love it.
Good. Well, keep up the good work, and thank you so much for giving me not 1 but 2 days out of your life, and good luck with everything, and take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Sounds great. Thank you. You too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Yes But Why podcast.